Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I'm back with another super exciting video. And I am finally back with Raphael from Reydiant Reality Tarot. Hi Raphael, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. We're actually together today because we're finally finishing up our series about astrology and the major arcana in the tarot. And so we have 4 more videos to go. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to Raphael's channel. He does brilliant forecasts for all of the signs. I never miss these because they're always freaky accurate. And if you want to watch the whole series, you're going to have to be subscribed to both of our channels. And so, welcome back, Raphael. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm excited to talk about the moon card today.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone out there that has subscribed to both of us and has been following the series because I had a lot of comments asking when the next ones were coming. So we're glad to be back and finishing it up. And we are. We're here to talk about the moon card. So can I dive in?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. So with the moon card, which I have here ready and waiting. So as you can see, the moon card is one of those cards in tarot that when people see it, they are a little bit sort of put off. And some people get a bit kind of miffed. Some people get a bit weirded out by this. And I always think that that kind of speaks to the energy of the card because it's not really like the happiest or the the brightest card. There's nothing on there that really grabs you and says, oh yay, this is great. Now with the moon card, things that you're definitely looking at are themes that you'll see with the moon card are the past will definitely come up with this. Intuition, instinct, this is the imaginable, but it's also a very unclear energy. I gotta be honest with you, the moon card is not one of my favorite cards because when it shows up, you know that there are things that are a little bit murky. There are things that aren't necessarily very clear. It also speaks to that part of us that reacts emotionally or instinctually. And so, as you can see on the card, you've got the pool of water here. This literally speaks to the energy of the subconscious mind and the thoughts and the feelings that we store in that space. And then when you see the small crustacean that's climbing out of the water, that really is like your deep-seated emotional stuff and sometimes even your fears. It's like the things that you can't necessarily put into words or speak to. And the two little doggies, or one's a dog and one's a wolf, these kind of speak to the animal nature of people. Now, when you think about the moon is a cyclic being. It goes through waxing and waning and all the phases, which, obviously you guys know because Heather does the Cosmic Community based on that. Human beings are very cyclic by their nature as well. And the moon card speaks to those instinctual and sort of even animistic aspects of us. What I also say to people with this card as well, it can be sometimes wasted insight. So it's like things come up, you know them, you feel them, you can't necessarily put them into words. And for that reason, because it doesn't have like a tangible element, people will ignore what's come up or they'll kind of try to push it away, which speaks to, because the moon card is ruled by Pisces. And I think that that energy of it kind of speaks to the escapist kind of nature. Like it's not tangible, you can't really put your hands on it or you're trying to push it away. And the moon card is a very watery energy. So whatever comes up in the thoughts or in the mind, it's usually that when the moon card shows up, it's being heavily influenced. The situation, the person, or whatever is being heavily influenced by the emotional sort of world or realm. And very often our past patterns or conditionings as well. Does that kind of speaks to Pisces, right?
I mean, it speaks more to the moon, which would make sense because it's the moon card, but it almost is like a combined energy. The moon, when it's in Pisces, actually tends to do quite well in a lot of ways. But if you were to look at like that moon energy and that Pisces energy kind of as separate entities, it's like almost exactly what you're describing because the moon does it represents our habitual patterns. It represents our instincts. It represents those kind of habits and things that we just do over and over and over again without actually thinking about it. It's our subconscious nature. And it also obviously is our emotions and our inner emotional world and those emotions that drive us without us necessarily, again, having to think about it consciously. And it is like something that's untangible. Like what we feel is not always connected to what's going on out in reality. But that murkiness, that almost Neptunian energy that you're describing, that's not necessarily the moon, because the moon has the ability to be very discerning depending on where it's at in the zodiac and what it's connected to. But that Piscean energy is it's very magical, it's very creative, it's very intuitive, but what it lacks in terms of its ability to perceive things, because it is, again, very empathic, very intuitive sign, is discernment. And so it's almost like this empathy and this like openness and this understanding of everything, but without the ability to discern unless it's rooted in something else, unless there's something else going on in the chart that helps to root that energy, which brings about like the psychic gifts where it's like, I can understand this and I can use it. But it sounds like the moon doesn't have that grounded energy.
No. And it's really interesting because hearing you talk about that, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's like, Raph's a Pisces basher. I'm really not. I love the sign of Pisces. I've got friends that are, that's such a buzzword sentence, isn't it? Like, I've got friends that are Pisces. All jokes aside, you can see this in the pillars. So you can see the pillars they're grayed out. They don't have any color. There's nothing there that necessarily suggests that it stands out or that it provides weight. And this, for me, really does speak to that energy that you said, like, of, like the blanket where things bleed into each other.
Yeah.
That for me suggests this. Like when you see the pillars, it's like this world and the other world, this world and the spiritual world, this world and the mystical or the intangible. It's where they kind of bleed into each other. And when you delve into spirituality, there really is no separation between this realm that we know. And I think if you're naturally spiritually inclined, or you have that kind of thought process, which, if you're into astrology or tarot or anything like this, you understand that at a deep fundamental level. But with the moon card, this can sometimes be where not only the barriers bleed into each other, but it's like you can't pull them apart. You can't really separate them. And that again comes in with the dog and the wolf. So the dog represents like the loyalty part of us, and the wolf represents like where you think beyond yourself, but it's like a reaction. Do you know what I mean? It's like instinctual more than anything else. And it's true, like the moon card can be very empathic. Whenever this card shows up, what you tend to be seeing is what's happening in a client's environment, like what's close to them or who's close to them. And if it's the moon card, there will be some difficulty or challenge, or maybe even some what's the word, something that's not clear that's going on, like in their environment or with one of their interpersonal connections. So for that reason, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting as well when you mentioned the cycles and patterns, because the moon card can also show you where you are slave to the rhythm. Like where you just won't break out of it, and it's like, well, this is easier to do, so I'm just going to kind of go with that flow.
That makes a lot of sense. And could you speak a little bit more to the aspect that's connected to like fears and things like that? Because to me, as you're describing this is like almost like all three water signs. I know this is like the strong water energy in the tarot, but it's almost like all three water signs like melded together. You have that Scorpio energy, which is that reactionary energy. It's those fears, those anxieties, that sort of dark side. It's like the dark side of all the water signs, basically, is what you're describing. And the symbolism too has all of that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the crustacean, if you look at this, when you look at it close up, it can be seen as, some people call it a lobster, other people, and it's funny because I know the lobster was once the Cancerian symbol, wasn't it, as like an animal. And some people have said it's kind of similar to a scorpion. Now, for me personally, It's the idea that this thing that is alien to us is coming out of that subconscious. So we don't really understand it. It's something different, something other that has like a hold on. And as you see it stepping onto the land, that's that moment at which, okay, this is bubbling up from within me. And it's like you have a moment to catch it, but there's so much other sort of murkiness going on that it really could be like an irrational fear. It's not necessarily like one that you're consciously in control of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And like the moon doesn't have its own light, right? It's like reflecting light from the sun. And I know that you had some of that in your notes about like the major arcana. Could you talk about that a little bit and how that kind of plays into that sort of dark, shadowy side of this moon card?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you say, the moon doesn't have its own light. And the moon card is deeply reflective. That's the other way that this would show up as well, is it could literally be showing you a mirror or an opposite image. So when we talk about reflection, you are like in one aspect, reflection is healthy because we're looking over something or we're turning it over in our minds and stuff. On the other side, this could literally be something mirrored back at you. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I'm seeing this. Is that me, or is it something that I'm projecting that's coming back at me? So it's like, again, that whole thing, like a hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like that. It was also with the reflective energies of the moon as a card. I often say to people, this is about really emotional discernment, because it's once you can figure out, okay, what is mine, what is somebody else's, you can then separate out the two. Does that
Yeah,
kind
no, that
of
makes
answer the
sense.
question?
That makes a lot of sense. And so, like, in what other ways is this tied to the sign of Pisces? Because I know a lot of people will be surprised that this is a Pisces card versus a Cancer card. So, what's the differentiation there?
I mean, honestly, I think it is that. So when the moon card comes up in terms of its positive aspects, you are looking at more creative kinds of things that bubble up from within the depth of the consciousness, things that come to you intuitively or kind of whisper on a ribbon, or that moment where you get stuck sort of writing something and it's like you're just pulling that information through. That's where you kind of meld into it. I think for me, where it really speaks to Pisces is the Neptunian element. It's
Yeah.
a lot more Neptunian than, like other cards. And what's funny is the crossover. Sorry, it's a whole bunch of police cars going past. The crossover that you get between this is the Hanged Man is really much about kind of surrendering to the experience that you're having or potentially sacrificing. Whereas the moon card is really about sort of opening up. It really is about being sort of not so much lost in the source, but really allowing whatever is the stronger current to take you with it. Like once you open up those senses, it's like, okay, I'm open to whatever's going to come to me and I'll go with that because it's a stronger current than I'm projecting, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. It's more like a going with the flow of the energy type of
Yeah,
situation.
absolutely.
Okay. Interesting. And so, what's the numerology behind this card?
Oh, that's a good one. So the moon card is number 18. 1 and 8 obviously gives you the number 9. So its opposite in the major arcana is literally the number 9, which is the hermit. So these are the signs of Pisces and
That
Virgo,
makes
which
sense.
they sit right opposite each other in the zodiac, but also the number 9 in numerology represents completion and also completion of cycles. And the number 9 on the Kabbalistic tree is known as Yesod, which is actually the number that rules the sphere of the moon. And so you kind of get this almost like transcendent energy with this card, but unfortunately, as an energy and a taroic symbol, it just doesn't tend to bring much of the good stuff unless it's surrounded by other cards that are lighter and brighter.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like we covered a lot of stuff here, but just so people kind of have an idea, if this card comes up in a reading that you're doing for somebody, just kind of maybe as thinking about it more as a separate entity, obviously it goes together with everything else that's being pulled. What would you say that it might represent?
The past, usually that's a big one for people. And I mean, I know the signs in the house. Excuse me, I know the house signs and the houses are different, but Pisces is the 12th sign, right? So it has a lot of those elements, but usually with the moon card, I see it come up, it will represent the past of something. Again, that unclear kind of, you're not really seeing everything, or an emotional situation. It can be that your intuition and your instincts are somewhat blocked by whatever else is surrounding you at that time as well.
Okay, cool. Well, is there anything else that we didn't touch on here?
No, I think we've literally like exhausted the moon card, which is crazy. Imagination, I think that's one thing that maybe we don't talk about with the moon, but again, not necessarily in the like, yeah, imagination kind of way. It's more with the moon card, as opposed, I guess, to Pisces. It's more a case of, well, that's just your imagination. There's no substantial sort of energy behind it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Good, good. Well, this was super interesting. You guys, we're going to do the sun card next over on Raphael's channel. And in the meantime, make sure you check out this playlist that's floating around somewhere up here with the entire series that we've done on the Major Arcana. Thank you again, Raphael, so much for being here. I'm going to drop your link down below for everyone so they can head on over to your channel, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you soon. Thanks for having me.
Bye.